Tenet, directed by Christopher Nolan, is one of my most anticipated movies of the year. Saying that, there hasn't really been many movies that have released this year. I was really highly anticipating this movie, and saying Nolan being one of my favourite film directors of all time, making some of my all-time favourite movies. Tenet looked really intriguing, and I had a brilliant time watching a new release in the theatre. I haven't seen a new release since January, I think, in the theatre. I had a great time watching this movie. Now, do I think this is one of his ultimate greatest movies? No, as of yet. But I think this movie is definitely in need of some rewatches because of how complex this entire plot is. It requires a lot of information to understand. But it's not a difficult movie to get a grasp of. I think the entire concept of it is amazing, but it's not too difficult to understand. It's just that there's certain parts of the story that you have to arc together, and I feel this will be a lot better on rewatches when I get a full grasp of everything that's happened. But it's left me thinking. I'm constantly thinking about this movie, and the more I think about it, the more amazed I am at how meticulously crafted this entire story is. Now, I do think Tenet is a pretty great movie. I don't think it's one of Nolan's ultimate best films, but maybe it'll stand the test of time. But I do have a few little issues with the movie that I'd like to pinpoint as of now. I'm not sure how these issues will pan up when I rewatch the film, but still, I feel that the majority of the issues come with the slightly lacking in characterization. That caused this film not to really have as much emotional resonance as it could have had, and I think that was a little bit of a problem because there were moments that I could feel where there could have been some emotion or really big tension coming in. This movie is extremely thrilling, but there wasn't much there in terms of the characters. It was all very plot-focused, and it's definitely extremely more plot-orientated film, so I can understand why there isn't as much to the characters. I do love all the performances, especially with John David Washington, who's literally called the protagonist in the film. He doesn't actually have a name. He was an interesting character, but there really wasn't too much we learned about him at all. I liked Robert Pattinson in the movie. He was a good companion, and seeing where he leads towards the end I quite enjoyed. And Elizabeth Debicki and the villain played by Kenneth Branagh, I actually really loved their storyline. There was a little bit of emotional connection there, but the overarching story, these characters just felt like plot points to move the story along. They didn't really feel like characters we were invested in and seeing their arcs take place. We were just seeing the story through their eyes, which was interesting, but I would have liked a bit more to them. But I understand this is a more plot-orientated film, and sometimes this movie just requires just a bit too much explaining, and I feel like if they really put loads into the characters, it would have diminished the plot a little bit and made it even more confusing. But still, with a narrative like this, all that explaining and exposition is needed, because there is a lot of that in the first hour of this film, and it can make this first hour of this film feel like there isn't much happening, the plot isn't kicking off. But when you re-look at the film and see where it leads off to, all of that feels necessary to make everything connect up a lot better. The opening scene really got straight into it with this amazing action sequence, and I was waiting for it to arc around to that, and it never did. But where it does go, I thought was extremely epic and awesome. And I'm not sure whether these issues about the story really not arcing as well as I think in my head, and with the lacking characters, I'm not sure if these issues will be present on repeat viewings, but I feel that this film really does improve the more I think about it, the more thought I put into it, and I really cannot wait to rewatch it. There are things I loved in this movie though, so let's get into that now. The majority of what I loved in this movie came down to the plot and how so well it is done, how the tension interweaves, how this entire thing is set up, this inversion thing I thought was really intriguing. I'm not going to spoil any elements of the plot for you at all, but it's so intriguingly well done and meticulously well crafted. I absolutely adored how the plot was done. Of course, there is so much complexity and thought and intensity put into this film that sometimes the plot you can feel like it feels convoluted, but seeing where it goes and seeing how it's all put together, I think it works so well, and looking back on the movie, it's what I want to think about. It's really impressive. Also, the visuals were extremely extravagant in this film. There were some things that were just completely mind-boggling as to how they actually pulled them off. It's one of those, how the hell did they shoot that movies? And they're with the different things moving backwards and forwards in the same shots during these big epic awesome action sequences. Some things are moving in one time period and some things are moving in another, and there's things that are moving backwards in time and things that are moving forwards in time in the same action scenes, and these things will interact with each other. And these action sequences were flawless. These action scenes were so good, and this entire house that's built around them and showing them again from different perspectives, I thought was so cleverly well done, and some of the best stuff Nolan has ever done. And the final half of this movie, I thought was near perfect. The first half I have a few issues with, and the characterization, as I said, but the final half of this movie was so good. And these epic action sequences were so breathtaking. These really are some of the most impressive sequences I've seen in a Nolan film. The score by Ludwig Grossman, he's done some of the best scores of the past few years. His score was great here. There's a lot of really loud noises to them, and it really does have a strong impact, and it really does add to the gripping intensity of the entire things that are happening. And the score was very loud, actually so loud that sometimes it became a little difficult to hear what some characters were saying. Anyway, the final half of this film was completely incredible and some of the best filmmaking I've seen in the past few years. But it took a while to get there, and the first half, I think, had some really well stuff that was planned up, especially for some twists and ambiguity that comes in later in the film and how it all arcs together. I do feel like that will improve a lot on rewatches, and I can't really discredit that as a flaw as of now, because while I was watching that first half take place, I was like, okay, I'm waiting for this to get moving, there's a lot of explaining, I'm getting all the information, I'm getting invested, but then when it got into the last half, I was just like, wow, this is really amazing. But I look back at the first half and like, well, I wasn't really too invested there. But when I look back at the entire picture, everything that's happening in that first half sets up what happens later so well. I think on rewatches, I'm going to enjoy this film and appreciate this film a lot more. And overall, Tenet was a great experience in the cinema. I have a few issues. I think there could have been a bit more characterization, as I said, a bit more emotion to it. But I think Nolan did an excellent job directing this movie. I think it's very epic in its scale. There's a lot going on. The standard plot on its own isn't that interesting, what's happening, but it's how they decide to tell it with this sort of weird take on moving through time that I thought was absolutely brilliant. And it was so well done. Tenet has some masterful things in it that I thought were really incredible. And it's a movie that has left me thinking about it. It's left me thinking about the plot, thinking about how this makes sense, how this works here. It's a movie that's going to be analysed in the future. Is it anywhere near as great or thought-provoking as Inception or some of his other films? No, because those movies do have really great characters within them. This film doesn't really do that as much as it could do. But I still think this film is really well put together. It's extremely exciting. The score is so amazing. It's a loud, epic movie, but it's also extremely well told. And there were moments where I was in complete awe at how amazing this movie was. And I had a great time watching Tenet. I really recommend going to see it in the theater. And yeah, I loved watching this movie. I'm going to give Tenet an A. I'm also going to give this movie a 9 out of 10. I really love this movie. Is it another masterpiece from Nolan? No, but I do think this movie will improve on rewatches, and I'm really excited to rewatch it. I think it will get better, and I think this grade will get higher. But guys, let me know what you think of Tenet if you have seen it, and look forward to a Nolan Films Ranked video coming soon. And of course, thanks for watching, and goodbye.
You're not shooting the bullet, you're catching it.
Whoa. Well, I've seen too much.